Good evening. Welcome to the continuation of the Tuesday, February 10th, 2015 Elmhurst Board of Education meeting. The board has been in closed session since 6 o'clock this evening to discuss negotiations, employment of employee, and student residency. We have 7 members present, none absent. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now for the best part of any Board of Education meeting, student and staff recognition. Mr. Purnell.
Yeah, we're going to start off tonight with student recognition, and I would like to call up Bill Riddle. And Bill is going to do the honors for 17 All-State Illinois Music Educators Association Award winners. So with that, Bill.
Good evening. It is truly a pleasure to be here this evening. Look forward to this event every year, and we just finished our event, the All-State Conference, which was not this past weekend, but the weekend before. And so we are able to recognize these fabulous musicians from York High School tonight. The organization that's responsible for bestowing this honor is actually the Illinois Music Educators Association, or ILMEA. It's really no small feat for any student to make it this far, where our 17 students have. I would like to, before I talk a little further about that, I'd like to recognize our music faculty from York High School: Becky Marianetti, Ray Oswald, Mike Pavlik, Chris Gemko, and our other performing arts faculty, Anna Shapozhnikoff and Michelle Skurlock-Jensen. I'd also like to recognize our fellow music educators from across District 205, because this truly is a team effort on our end to be able to work with these students all the way from 4th grade up until their level in high school. Back to the ILMEA, it's a professional organization with the mission to promote lifelong music learning and to provide leadership for music education. The process begins in October when students from all over the state of Illinois individually audition on a set of predetermined music and technical exercises. The state is divided into 9 districts, and York High School is a member of District 1, which is actually one of the largest and most competitive districts in the state. In District 1 alone, there are approximately 3,000 students from 75 different schools that auditioned for the honor of being selected into all-district band, jazz ensemble, orchestra, and choir.
Sorry I'm late, Mr. Riddle.
That's all right, Cameron. Cameron knows how to make an entrance, and it's all right. You're good. It's all good. This year, York High School was well represented in the District Festival, with 52 of our students selected. The All-District Festival concerts were presented last November. After the All-District Festival, the students receiving the highest scores in each of the 9 districts are selected to participate in the All-State Music Festival, which took place, as I said a couple weekends ago, in Peoria, January 28th through the 31st. Students were selected for all-state recognition. They spent 3 days in Peoria to be part of the performing groups comprised of the top high school musicians from across the state. This experience culminated in a concert on the final day of that trip. I'd like you to join me in congratulating the outstanding accomplishments of these 17 students from York High School. And who would be first on the list but Cameron Brown? Who is a bassoonist, Caitlin Cadigan, soprano. Joelle Chu, yes. Joelle Chu, violin. Daphne David, clarinet. Julia Dirkscheide, harp. Andrew French, double bass. We had another student, Lauren Gaynor, who not only is a flutist and is recognized for that, but also took second place in the arranging category for the composition contest, and that's quite an honor as well. Lauren Gaynor. Robert Kildow, clarinet. Ella Lee, violin. Brooke Morenz, alto voice. Elizabeth Mazzacco, violin. Wes Nelson, double bass. Haley Nicholson, bassoon. Amy Strzok, flute. Lena Stojakovic, alto voice. Hannah Widmeyer, soprano voice. And Leah Young, French horn. Again, let's have a round of applause for all our 17 all-state students. Thank you.
You can do it. After Mr. Riddle shakes your hand, don't go anywhere. I have the privilege of reading the proclamation this evening. And I just want to preface it by saying the Elmhurst community knows we have, and I can honestly use the word great music program. I want to point out that for the 4th year in a row, the York Community High School was named a Grammy Signature School semifinalist. That is not an award to be taken lightly. Just 2 years ago, we were named by the Grammy Foundation as one of the top 3 music programs in the nation. As an aside, I recently interjected myself in a conversation at a gas pump with a woman who was a new Elmhurst resident. She had moved from out of state, and when the person fueling his car behind me asked why she moved to Elmhurst, her answer was for the music program. So I believe Elmhurst, certainly, whether you have children in the music program or not, get a return on their investment. And it's a substantial investment that we make in the music program, and it's a substantial return that we get back. So with that said, let me read the proclamation. Whereas the Music Educators Association, ILMEA, competitions were considered the most prestigious statewide student recognition program in music education, and whereas high school musicians undergo stringent auditions competing against students from one of 9 individual IMEA districts, followed by the qualifying students earning a place in that district's honor ensemble, from which the all-state musicians are chosen. And whereas this program recognizes some of the best musicians in the state of Illinois and rewards excellence on the part of individual students while encouraging further music study and artistry. And whereas your community high school students, Cameron Brown, bassoon, Caitlin Cadigan, soprano voice, Joelle Chu, violin, Daphne David, clarinet, Julia Dirkscheide, harp, Andrew French, double bass, Lauren Gaynor, flute, Robert Kildow, clarinet, Ella Lee, violin, Elizabeth Mazzacco, violin, Brooke Morenz, alto voice, Wes Nelson, double bass, Hallie Nicholson, bassoon, Lena, help me, Lena. Thank you. Alto voice, Amy Straunch, flute, Hannah Widmeyer, soprano voice, and Leah Young, French horn, were awarded all-state recognition in their particular musical specialty and performed in the All-State Band, Chorus, and Orchestra Festival on January 28th through 31st, 2015, and at the Illinois Music Educators All-State Convention Festival in Peoria, Illinois. And whereas Lauren Gaynor was also awarded second place in the arranging category at the All-State Student Composition Contest for her arrangement of, Lauren, help me. Thank you. From the movie, help me, Lauren. Thank you. And whereas these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to York Community High School, to District 205, and to the community, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education and the administration of Elmhurst Community Unit District 205 express congratulations to these students, their parents, and faculty members of the York Performing Arts Division, Chairman William Riddle, Christopher Glemkow, Rebecca Marionetti, Ray Ostwald, Mike Pavlik, and Anna Shapoznikoff, thank you, and Michelle Sherlock for this outstanding accomplishment. One more round of applause is due.
Yeah, just for the audience, we have National Board Merit Certified Teacher we're going to honor tonight. That's going to be delayed. The teacher cannot be here this evening, so we'll delay that and honor her at the next meeting. So with that, we're going to have Shining Star recognition, and I think my board's wishes, if I heard them right, is to invite all Shining Star recipients up here at once, and then we'll recognize them individually. Is that correct, if I'm reading my board right? Good. So could I have Shining Star recognition if you would come up to the front? And for those in the audience who don't know, this is a fairly new recognition. This is a recognition for our employees who go above and beyond the call of duty and are not always recognized. And the Shining Star is simply fellow employees recognizing the outstanding service of their fellow employees and nominating them for Shining Stars. And so we are lucky tonight to have 13 individuals who are coming up this evening as outstanding employees and who make a difference for kids in District 205.
Good evening. First is Ron Madison. Is Ron here? Oh, hello. Appropriately, he's the custodian at Madison. He was nominated by Debbie Vasta, Lindsay Sloan, Chris Alvarado, Laura Preston, Bridget McDonald, Gina Lascotti, Ellen Holper, Katie Delaney, and Teresa Cerrillo, which I'm impressed. Outside my family, I don't have that many people that would like me enough to nominate me, so that's very impressive. Ron goes above and beyond his duties and is always pleasant with a smile on his face. He anticipates areas that need attention and is willing to help everyone. He is a true team player, and students love Ron. He genuinely cares about all of the students and staff at Madison. That's Ron Madison. Tonight I also get to honor Heather, and is Heather here? Help me with your name, Nonsek? Nonsek, all right. She's a reading specialist and a mentor at Jefferson. She was nominated by Elizabeth Franks and Leslie Weber. Heather has provided exceptional leadership and mentor support to the new resource teacher at Jefferson. She regularly checks in to ensure that she is up to date on important events and deadlines, provides paperwork and case manager support, as well as instructional leadership to determine the best interventions for students. Heather has given up her own personal time, including weekends and planning time, to provide the help and support needed. That's Heather Nonsek.
Excellent. I have Michael Johnson. Hi, Michael. Instructional tech coach at Bryan, nominated by June Winchester and Ellen Dunn. Mike's willingness and expertise to work out any idea to incorporate technology into the classroom is a fantastic asset to the district. If there is an idea that does not work, Mike will definitely go beyond the routine with other creative tech ideas. He is always happy to assist, create, and problem solve. Michael Johnson. I'm going to apologize. Mary Makalinsky. Did I get that right? Social worker at Madison, nominated by Doreen Cummings and Lindsay Sloan. The students absolutely love Mary and always want to work with her. She is always willing to drop everything to help a colleague with a problem or with a student. She is an extremely approachable person. Everyone knows they can count on Mary for her support, knowledge, and respect. In a building that has doubled in size in the last 10 years, teaching assistants, OTs, PTs, SLPs, and psychologists have been added, but there's only one Mary. In addition, Mary makes the best cookies and makes them for everyone's birthday. So I have a birthday in August. You guys can... Thank you, Mary.
And I have the honor of honoring Sharon Emmy Ivanelli. She's the instructional coach at Fisher. Sharon has always gone, and she was nominated by Joan Marcellus and Desiree Guerrero. Sharon has always gone above and beyond to support veterans and new teachers. She is constantly finding new research to share and inform the staff. She is willing to implement and model different teaching best practices and methods. Sharon is a constant source of support through her varied educational background with her ELL endorsement, reading specialist degree, and Wilson language training. Thank you, Sharon. I also get the honor of honoring Joe Glockley. Gleckley, yes. Sorry, thank you.
No harm done.
Okay, thank you. No wonder.
Lucky one.
Joe was nominated by Lori Giblin and Tammy Poole. And as just witnessed, Joe has such positive interactions with all people, especially kids. He is always interested in whatever they want to show or tell him. During the big snow, it was important to Joe that the parking lot was safe for the 5 pregnant teachers currently working at Field. He will gladly help carry heavy items from the building into the building from a car. Every teacher at Field School has their own story about how helpful Joe is and has been to them. Thank you, Joe.
She turned it off. I have the pleasure of recognizing Marguerite Dvoracek. She's an educational assistant at Bryan, and she was nominated by June Winchester and Lisa DeSanti. The positive, caring energy Marguerite shows to students and staff is a great asset to the school. She is always happy and positive towards all students, inside and outside of class. She goes above and beyond her job by also assisting or helping other students not assigned to her by passing out papers or materials. Marguerite Dvoracek. Also have the pleasure of recognizing Christy Elliott. Hi, Christy. Computer literacy teacher at Bryan, nominated by June Winchester and Deborah Thompson. Christy is always willing to assist anyone who is having a technical issue relating to their computer. She goes above and beyond her time during the workday, which is greatly appreciated, especially when there are last-minute issues with the computer or software before a teacher's class. Christy is always positive in helping others. Christy Elliott.
And I have the privilege to nominate June Winchester. Is June here? Okay. June is art teacher at Bryan. She was nominated by Catherine Majerski and Deborah Thompson. June displays multiple display cases with student art. She also ensures that as many as 7 bulletin boards throughout the school and throughout the building show student work. In addition, she often puts students' work up in the library and above lockers. June and her students beautify the school. So thank you, June. It is also my pleasure to recognize Gloria Rurg and Mary Kay Malone. They're secretaries at Bryan. They were nominated by June Winchester and Melissa Couch. Gloria and Mary Kay are a powerful, positive force in the school office. Their caring and concern for staff and students is very evident and much appreciated. They always take the time for any concern or need and truly show an interest towards others, not only in the school, but outside of the school. It is nice to know there is always a friendly smile in the office. Thank you very much, Gloria and Mary Kay.
Okay, there are 2 more awards. Audrey Reed, hi, Benefits Coordinator for the district. She was nominated by Jessica Walker and Maria Price. Audrey has been a constant reassuring voice for the entire workforce in her position as Benefits Coordinator. She responds to concerns in a timely and personal manner. One never feels cut off or rushed by her. In a position that deals with so many people and issues, Audrey is truly a star in her kind, efficient, caring manner. Her ability to clearly explain the intricacies of our benefits and to then help employees understand and access key resources is most valued. One of the key benefits of our district is having a person like Audrey to go to. And Debbie Thompson. Debbie's not here, okay. Family and Consumer Science teacher at Bryan. She was nominated by June Winchester and Jessica Tadavosian. Debbie is continually going out of her way to assist students and staff members relating to family and consumer science, whether it be help in stitching up a split in a seam or assisting a coworker in any number of ways. Her willingness to help and assist goes beyond her normal school day and is much appreciated. Her Taking Care of Others Club should be recognized for making and donating items to Good Samaritan Hospital Children's Ward and the Cancer Center at Edwards Elmhurst Hospital.
All right, next on our agenda is public comments. I don't have any little blue cards here. Anybody left out there that wants to make a public comment? Well, then we'll move on to Superintendent's communication. Mr. Purnell.
Yes, this evening we do not have any backup material for this item, but I wanted to talk to the board again, and we have talked about this in relation to the PMA projections and budget development along with staffing for the coming school year. And that is the area of discretionary staffing. If you remember at the last board meeting, we had finalized staffing for the 2015-16 school year as a maintenance program for staffing. And so those maintenance staffing positions have been approved, and we were moving forward with hiring and interviewing in a number of those positions that a board tentatively approved at our last meeting. We are now at the point where we usually look at the budget projections and start talking about the possibility of discretionary staffing. But as we have looked at it this year, I think the administration has a number of concerns about recommending any discretionary staffing, and that is why there's not any documentation to you this evening, because we simply are not going to recommend any kind of discretionary staffing across the district for the coming school year at this point in the budget process. The reason for that, there are a number of reasons, as the board can certainly understand and is knowledgeable about. Probably the biggest factor is the uncertainty of state funding going forward. There are a number of proposals at the state level about funding. Unfortunately, part of the problem we face across the state is the lack of being able to long-range plan on a budget. We're trying to develop our budget responsibly in the January, February, March timeframe, and yet we will not have a final budget from the state until way into the start of the next school year. That makes it very difficult to make any long-range planning, even on a year-to-year basis, much less on a 2 or 3 year basis. But as we looked at things like the Senate Bill 1 that is now being floated out there, that again is addressing the equity funding issue across the state. We simply don't know where that's going to go. Pension, again, is going to be discussed. It's still working its way through the Supreme Court, but we do feel that at some point there will be a decision on pensions, and that would put additional funding at risk for Elmhurst along with other districts across the state. The governor has proposed a 2-year freeze on property tax increases across the state that has yet to be fleshed out and developed, but it's another piece in the whole picture of state funding. And so with that uncertainty and with the kind of funding we're seeing in the PMA projections, we would recommend to the board that we not pursue a discussion of additional discretionary staffing for next year at this point in time. If we firm up on the budget picture, we could still come back to the board with further discussions on this issue, but at this point in time, in good faith, we really can't recommend additional staffing. So with that, I'm open to discussion with the board.
Anyone? John?
I just think it's notable that the things you listed that present these open questions that prevent us from making more progress than we have in the last few discretionary cycles are all external factors. They're all state legislative things. SB 1, pension funding, the governor proposing a freeze on property taxes. I just want to congratulate the administration on putting together proposals that do the best with so many unknowns out there. And just reassure people we're going to do the best we can as these things come from external sources. It is very disruptive, these multiple contradictory accountabilities or so-called accountabilities that are making it very difficult on education. And we're one of the more fortunate districts. What is it like for those districts who don't have the resources that we have? So I just want to thank staff for recognizing there are so many things in the air and taking a good conservative course on this.
Chris?
I also think it's worth pointing out that we did some discretionary investment last year. We committed to do that for 3 years at least. That is in this budget. So we are continuing to fund something over and above where we were last year in this. And so that we do have investments beyond just baseline that take multiple years. One of the things we're doing is piloting some of these things that hopefully when we have if and when we were to have resources, we could expand. And it would be nice at some point in time in the future to have a discussion about some of the stuff we've done on a discretionary basis last year and how that's rolling out and how it's going, as we talk about what would happen if we were to have additional resources at some point in the future, but also in communicating to the public the investments that we've made and kind of what they're doing for the kids.
We have plans to bring that to a board meeting. So, we will get a report from the first year of piloting these programs about the effect they've had on the education of our kids. So look forward to that. That's coming. Anyone else? All right, Dave?
Sure. The next part of the agenda is Vision 2020, and David, if you could pull that PowerPoint up. I think I'm going to go to the podium for this and grab them. I want to talk a little bit tonight about Vision 2020, and this is an initiative that had its roots in an association I belong to, the Illinois Association of Superintendents, but was quickly joined by the school business officials across the state of Illinois, and as you will see, a lot of other groups that have brought into this. Vision 2020 is an attempt to really step back and look at the state of education in Illinois and to really bring some common discussion and understanding about the direction of where the state of education should be. You're going to hear me talk about the pillars of the Vision of 2020, a little bit about how we can get involved. This is the partners that have so far signed on with Vision 2020. And as you can see, it's a number of statewide organizations, IASB, IASA, the School Business Officials Association that I already mentioned. Also, the state PTA has recently endorsed the Vision 2020 as part of their adoption at the state level. So part of the Vision of 2020 is making sure that public education works for all students and that it's effective for all students across the state. One of the things that I think Illinois can be proud of, it was one of the first states that really adopted college readiness and put in place an assessment, ACT, for all students in the state. And if you remember, prior to that, it was a select group of students who decided they were going to college, and only those students took the SAT, ACT. It was done on a Saturday. It was at their expense, and it was 50%, 60% of the students across the state would take that exam. Illinois was one of the first states and is still one of only, I believe, 6 states across the nation that tests all students on the ACT test and things like the NAAP. And I think you can see in the results that Illinois has done very well compared to the nation. And I think because of issues like that, that have really tried to address how well all students are doing and making sure college is maybe accessible to even students who had not thought of that. There is still an achievement gap between how the district's funded, and you're going to hear me talk about how districts are funded across the state. I think it's no mystery that students at districts that have high poverty tend to have lower state support. But part of Vision 2020 is to really put in concrete understanding of what is really important in education and maybe some changes that should be contemplated. One of those is share accountability. You're going to hear me talk about making sure we have highly effective educators in front of students and in districts so that education is well done and it is effective for all students. What are we doing about 21st century learning skills, or do all students have access to those skills? And again, the equitable and adequate funding across the state for all districts in the state of Illinois. So when it comes to highly effective educators, one of the things that I think we're beginning to see is some teacher shortages in some certification areas across the state. And one of those issues that I think the state needs to address is how are we going to recruit and retain high-impact educators, those educators that we know might have a proven track record and may be valuable for students. It also goes to administration. We are seeing across the state fewer and fewer individuals taking up the role of administrator in the educational system. And again, there may be a shortage coming forward in the state of Illinois for that. And so one of the things we want to talk about is how do we recruit educators in the state? One issue is the lack of reciprocal agreements between other states and the educational licensing of teachers and administrators in Illinois. Illinois is one of the few states that does not reciprocate their licensing. There is a whole different track that you have to go through in the state of Illinois in order to be certified and qualified in Illinois. That has had a chilling effect on the number of new educators coming to the state. 2020 believes that should be addressed. The other thing is to provide some relevant professional development for the students, for the teachers and administrators that are here. including mentoring new educators. And I think you're going to see in the report, if you look at it in detail, that it really calls for the state to really have a statewide mentoring program for educators in their first 2 years. We invest a lot of dollars in educators. We want them to be successful, and yet it's kind of a hit and miss depending on the district you're in, how successful the mentoring program is. And we also want to emphasize collaboration. Do we have enough time and enough resources for educators to get together to collaborate? I think educators would tell you right now there is not enough time for that. There is not enough time for professional development and all the changes that have come in education, and somehow the state has to come to grips with that and talk about that. One of the other priorities is 21st century learning, and I'm just going to go through some of the things that I think can't be lost in the rush on assessment and mandatory evaluation of students. I think one of those is the development of the whole child. I think we hear a lot about the core subject areas, but I'm not sure we have discussions about things like how are we increasing creativity in students? How are we dealing with the social-emotional part of young people? How are we building team skills in kids and being able to get together? It seems like it's a whole curriculum area that's kind of that has been forgotten in this frenzy about assessment and Common Core. And I just think there's a cautionary tale not to lose sight of that. I think we need to preserve instructional time. I think we have talked about this with more and more assessment, more and more time on assessment. We are losing instructional time for kids in the classroom interacting with teachers. I think that needs to be addressed on a statewide basis. Again, you've heard this a lot. You've heard me talk about this. I think it's really important to invest in children really early. All of the research clearly says that students who we intervene with as early as 2 and 3 years old have a much better chance of being successful in school as they go through the system. And it calls for a solid investment in early education. We talk a lot about this in our district, linking students to college and careers. How do we not only get students ready for that college and career, but how do we link them up in real-world application so that there are opportunities for students to try out some of the things that we're asking them to do? And then finally, and we've talked about this a lot again in this district, how do we expand equity and technology even across our district? We have struggled with that. How do we make sure that technology is evenly distributed? All students have equal access to technology no matter what school they're at. It's not only a district issue, then it becomes a really critical statewide issue. The other one is we want to talk about is shared accountability. We really want to think about who is in the governance role across the state of Illinois. And one of the recommendations you will see in Vision 2020 is to actually have practicing educators, at least a few, sit on the State Board of Education. Right now, by policy, you are not allowed to be a practicing educator and be a State Board of Education member. We think that needs to change, and I think that part of the difficulty we have sometimes is that things that are in the governance area and policy at the state, when it becomes translated down to the district level, often run into significant problems and concerns. I think this would at least be an attempt to have practitioners who are on the state board who could lend another lens to what is going on with future policy and governance issues across the state of Illinois. We also think there has to be a differentiated accountability system. One size does not fit all, and I think part of, I think you've heard me say this before, I worry a little bit about the lack of local accountability, that more and more our accountability is being dictated by someone who is not here in Elmhurst, who may not even be in the area. It's a state system, a federal system, but I think the taxpayers in the community want local accountability. What is it that is important for us that we want to evaluate our students and make sure they have? That has eroded over time, and I think we need to take some of that back and say, and educators want to be accountable, but I think it's a question of what are we accountable for and what does the community want us to be accountable for? And there's less and less discussion about local accountability, more and more discussion about some centralized accountability. So we think that needs to be talked about. No surprise here, mandates, regulations. We are a heavily regulated entity in the state of Illinois, and we believe this is one of the key issues that we really need to address. We believe there are essential mandates that are important that we need to follow through. But we also believe there's a lot of discretionary mandates that should not be part, or at least should have a local decision on whether or not that mandate should be put in place across our district or not. I think we would agree that the essential mandates have to do with federal guidelines, student safety, civil rights issues. Those should not be at a choice. Those should be ones that we are obligated to provide. But even those should be fully funded. And right now, a lot of those are not fully funded. We have to fund those out of local dollars. But there's a lot of other discretionary funding outside of those essentials that I think really need to be scrutinized and decide whether or not that's essential to the education of every student and make that more of a local decision rather than a statewide decision that everybody's obligated to. And then finally, we've talked about this, the equitable and adequate funding. I don't think anybody would argue that every child in the state of Illinois and across the nation should have the access to a quality education. The question becomes, how is that going to be funded? And I think our objection is, in the last round, there was talk about a Robin Hood effect, that we would rob some districts to adequately fund other districts. I don't think that's the way you do that. I think you lower the bar for everybody when you do that. I think you have to have a discussion about what is an adequate education for all students, and then how do we fund that for every child, no matter where they live, what region, and regional cost differences are a factor. It costs less in some areas to provide that education than others. I think that has to be part of the factor. And so those are other discussions that have to take place. So, you know, fund education on local need and an evidence-based model of adequacy and equity is what is being talked about in this. And then stabilize state funding and funding for education. I just touched on this. I think there has to be a commitment from the state to fund education at least on a 2-year basis at a minimum, that we know what funding we're going to get over a 2-year period so we can do some long-range planning. You heard us tonight. We cannot recommend discretionary staffing simply because there's too many unknowns of what our funding is going to look like. That really handcuffs us when it comes to long-range planning. The board needs to be congratulated on making the commitment, for example, last year, that those pilot programs we put in place, we're going to fund for 3 years. That's the only way you can evaluate any kind of pilot program, is to give it time to develop and grow. And yet, in this budgetary environment, we don't know on a 8-12-month basis what our funding is going to be. I think that's a commitment that the state needs to make, to say, you know what, we're going to adopt a budget. It's a 2-year budget. You're guaranteed that budget at least over a 2-year period. So with that, that's kind of the presentation this evening. If the board has any questions, I think one of the things that you're going to hear is there is, from a lot of these organizations, that boards of education adopt a resolution supporting 2020. And so the board should consider that at a future meeting if that's the desire of the board. I can provide a policy. I will mail out to you, as a matter of fact, the whole policy behind a lot of these issues so you can look at it in detail. But this is kind of a thumbnail sketch of what Vision 2020 is. Questions?
Dave, thank you very much for presenting this to the full board. I know that we have a education conference every November, and in the 2013 conference, I happened to go to a session where your peers had spent, I don't know, 4 months putting a framework around this concept and presented it. And I was, I think, the only board member that was there, and you know, they asked for feedback. And I told them that I commended you superintendents for proactively leading the effort, that there's a lot of talk about education across the nation as well as the state. And instead of being reactive and having other people dictate what's happening, you all took a proactive leadership role, and that was commended. There happened to be the national school board president and the state school board president that was there as well. And so my question was, how can we as board support you, superintendent group that's rolling this out? And both the national and the state school board presidents said that they were going to be rolling it out to the boards, and that's how they got that support. So I commend you and your peers for proactively leading the charge, helping to represent the students in education and understanding the organization and the system that goes behind it, not skirting any of the issues and the difficult conversations that have to take place, but truly representing how do we move education for the state and the nation for all schools, or all students and all schools and school districts forward. So thank you for sharing it with the rest of the board. Second and last comment is, I happened to go to the PTA Council meeting, and our PTA president this year has received a presentation on Vision 2020. So it really is a very good program and communications and a collaboration effort that's behind this. And so I just thought that would be an important point to make as well. So I know that the PTA is looking at rolling the information out to all the PTA presidents, et cetera. So thank you.
I just wanted to mention that I do think 2020 has gotten, or Vision 2020 has gotten recognition at the state level. I know Governor Rauner referenced it in his transition report, and a couple times since then, you know, especially the acknowledgement that there's a lot of low-cost, high-impact recommendations in Vision 2020, and has also acknowledged the burden that unfunded mandates put on local school districts. So I think that's good.
All of the items that were mentioned were certainly noteworthy. I want to call attention just to one item, which seems relatively, I see no cost associated with it. And for all things I understand about getting feedback and making sure stakeholders are included, it confuses me why this has not been done before. And the point that I'm talking about specifically is expanding the educator's role and having them participate in the State Board of Education. So I just think that it seems relatively easy. I'm not sure, I haven't looked at it deeply enough, but I don't see any major pitfalls in that, and nor are there certainly any additional costs will be associated with that. So all of the ideas are extremely relevant, but making sure the stakeholders who do the job every day have a say-so would certainly make sense.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Chris has something.
Sorry about that. This is just the OCD finance guy in me, but there was an early slide about reductions to general state aid among low and high poverty districts as a result of proration. There are absolute nominal numbers. Yes, we lost 100, low poverty districts lost $100, high poverty districts lost $465, but as a percentage, that's because low poverty districts got less money from the state to start with. So, on a percentage of the amount, I think, Chris, tell me if I'm wrong, but the proration formulas are relatively consistent and actually favor the lower poverty, the higher poverty districts get prorated less than the lower poverty districts. We're prorated at 12 or 14%. But the point is, we may even have a higher percentage proration than the high poverty districts, but that 100, I just have an issue with the gap that shows, is that's because we get less to start with, and as a percentage of the total we get, that's probably a lot less. It's not a value statement, it's just a little bit of an intellectual honesty kind of thing. And then, kind of as we go through this is a complex issue, and I like the way that it's been broken down. I think you've hit a lot of the key areas in here. I think that what we have to recognize too is that the schools have become, and I think you gave us a really nice picture of what the schools from reading, writing, and arithmetic back when, and now we're doctor, we're psychologist, we're dentist, we collect dental forms now for children, and we're the implementation arm of every good thing that the legislature seems to think up. And not whether it's good or bad. I mean, they may be good things, but how am I going to? Every kid should see a dentist. Great. How are we going to figure that out? Well, we'll tell the schools they have to collect the dental forms, and no money comes with it. And so I think the role of the school in general, against the backdrop of all this and what we're doing, and that falls a bit under mandates, but it's recognizing that and that kind of segues into the second piece, which is just recognizing this as a partnership. It's not just shared accountability, it's shared responsibility. And it's the responsibility of the parents, the community, the teachers, the state. There's multiple groups that have a stake in this. And you know, I think the state tries to solve the problem, but I don't know if it's the state's job to solve the problem by itself. And I think this is hopefully an attempt to engage and, as Margaret said, get the educator's perspective, get the community's perspective. But I think it's important. And then just the last piece is just as you talk about spending and stability, yes, 2 years would be nice, but I think we look at 5-year plans. I think at its core, the stability is driven by this source of the funding. And you know, if you look at, and property taxes are high, yes, but it does provide a stable source of revenue that allows us to make decisions knowing that the volatility of that revenue source is not in question depending on, you know, wild economic swings. You see states that have large, you know, income tax funded bases, and when those things swing wildly, even if they want to fund the schools, they just don't have the money. And so it makes it very difficult. You know, it's hard for us to commit just on 2-year basis too. I mean, you've got core, you've got mandate things that you need to fund, and so what ends up getting whipsawed is the non-mandated things that, you know, if you shrink the budget 20%, but you have to keep spending your fixed costs and all the mandated stuff, your core stuff's going to swing a lot more than 20%. And so I think as we talk about funding and stability, I think the funding source conversation has to be had. And you know, I hear you on property taxes and kind of where they've gotten, but let's not fix one problem and create another one. So.
I don't disagree. I think especially the issue of mandates, I think there has to be a thoughtful discussion about what the role of school are and has been and where we're going with public education. Because some of these things are all good things to have. It's a question of who provides them and how are they provided. And what has happened is, I think education and public schools have become the dumping ground for any idea for societal change that wants to be initiated at a variety of levels. And I think there hasn't been thoughtful discussion about what that does to the overall impact of education for students in every district. And these are piecemeal. Mandates come one at a time, and there's never anybody who steps back and takes a culminating effect on all of the things that have gone on. And I'm hoping this kind of dialogue will at least open up that discussion to say, what are we really intending for education for students, and what are the things that public schools can do? And maybe there's some other entity that can do it better than we can, rather than this catch-all kind of, I think that we've become catch-all problem that we can solve through public schools.
So Dave, the question that I have is, you're rolling this out to us, and I know your peers are with their boards as well. So what is the communication, around this? So for example, our PTA council is having a legislative forum with our community and our legislators, senators, and representatives, and we as a board. And so we're entering into this dialogue. Not all districts are doing that. So can you kind of give us an idea of, okay, so you've presented this to us now. What should we foresee, in the future, as well as how is it? And I know that Governor Rauner has seen it, supports it, and it was in the his state of the state. But do you know how this is working? You know what I'm saying, from the state and ISBE, and what can we expect from this? How can we be linked to it?
Well, I think the first step is asking boards to support 2020 in a resolution form, and then taking that and sharing that with legislators and the governor to have them start to look at issues of 2020. I think it has to be at a ground level. I think there has been too many initiatives that started maybe at the top, at the legislative level, but never got an understanding at the community level about what this was about. Our attempt is to share this across all our constituencies, to give them a better idea of what this is, and then to create that dialogue that I think hopefully will be generated by sharing this information. I've done a short sketch for our local PTA council. I think Jennifer's planning on having somebody from the state PTA to come and do a full-blown presentation on 2020. But I think that's besides boards of education, I think the PTAs are a critical piece of giving them knowledgeable about what the issues are in 2020, what some of these priorities are, and then asking them to move forward with their dialogue, with their legislators, with other people, to take a look at this as we move forward with issues that are coming forward in the state of Illinois. I think it's going to take a while, as anything does, but I think just having the discussion and challenging some of the assumptions that have never been challenged before is healthy to have that dialogue. You know, as Margaret said, why don't we have practitioners on the State Board of Education? What is the downside of that? Why wouldn't we have practitioners who can give the practical view on how something could be implemented or what the implications could be for a mandate that's being considered at the State Board of Education level or a school code issue? So that's the idea.
John?
Thank you for getting involved in this. I think what it really does is it really gives a focus and a coordination that's really been needed. And I think you described it so aptly when you said it's been a catch-all for all sorts of social ideas that people have. I think the thing will be most successful when we can bring it outside of, I mean, I look at all these participating organizations and they're all participants in the education profession. And I think to really be successful, we got to somehow put it out there as a leader for the regular voters, for the parents, for the taxpayers, the people who want to see education treated the way we purport to treat it. But when we say we value education highest among our many institutions. So I'm just wondering how we can, as a board, get it out there to the voters, to our constituents. And I'm wondering if there's some program that the organization is going to put out there that we can participate in.
I would assume so, John. I don't know that yet. I think this is their big issue was just to get what this is out there first, and then developing the plan on what the next steps are. So I think it's still in its infancy, and I think it's just at this point gaining understanding of what this is and gaining support to move forward in some way. So.
Dave, thank you. When you get back to your chair, you can talk about community engagement. Same person, different chair.
Different chair. This evening, we have provided with the Board of Education, and I want to stress this is just a straw man draft of a possible charge to the Elmhurst community engagement process, and specifically to the facilitation team that will be developed. As the board knows, we have contracted with Unicom to provide and guide us in a community engagement process across the district. And one of the first steps is for the Board of Education to develop a charge for the committee and specifically to the facilitation team that will be steering the community engagement process. There will be approximately 15 members, community members, staff individuals, administration that will make up the facility team that will spearhead this attempt to really engage the community in a discussion on the future of Elmhurst. A lot of the things that we touched on tonight about funding, about grade level configuration, about early childhood, those will all be topics for the community engagement process. And I think it will hopefully really give a map to the community and to the district over the next 10 years about where we want education to go in the community of Elmhurst. But the first step, again, is to develop a charge to the committee so that when we bring the facility team together, we can share what their charge is, what their mission is, and to go forward with that. So tonight, we worked together, the administration put together this first draft of an engagement process and a charge to the committee. We would ask the board to review it this evening, consider to make changes. We can bring it back for future consideration. But we do want to start this process, and this is the first piece of moving forward on the community engagement process. So with that, it's open up to the Board of Education.
Shannon?
Thanks, Dave, for putting this together. We always work best when there's a draft in front of us, right? So I like this document. It's, it gives enough detail to guide a community group, but it doesn't provide too, narrow it. It doesn't narrow the scope too much either. So I like, I like the amount of information here talking about, the help that the board needs, and then what we'd like the facilitating team to do, and then that team will come back with recommendations to the board, advisory recommendations. So I like the way the document is set up. And my feedback is I want to focus on long-term. I like what you said about the next 10 years. I think that's really important. This is a long-term discussion. And we need to focus on our vision. The title talks about accomplishing our vision. So I want to focus on our vision and strategy and long-term planning.
I also agree with Shannon. This is a great document, and it provides a good guidance for all of us, for the board, and for the community on the direction that we're going and what our intentions are. Here's my one challenge: is I know there's a rationale, there's a reason why we selected 15 people. My challenge is, can we make that bigger? I understand the messiness it gets in trying to communicate with 15 people and trying to get a single accord going. And I'll tell you the reason that I would challenge us to try to make it as large as we can without it becoming unmanageable is that at this point there are, 13 schools? 13 schools. And that does not even, if we were to have a representative from each school, that does not even yet involve all the community members, which the majority do not have students in our school district. So, I'm trying to figure out how we manage having school representation, neighborhood representation, and that those community members who do not have students in our school, to make sure that we truly have community engagement initiative. So that would be my challenge. I understand the difficulty in trying to get people together. I understand how the larger the group gets, the longer it typically takes. But I also would challenge us to say to truly have a representative group that could talk about community engagement and represent all the diverse facets and perspectives that we would probably need to open it up to make it a little bigger.
Let me just comment on that a little bit, just a better definition of what this is going to look like. This 15 facilitation team is really the working group that will do a lot of the work. And as you correctly ascertained, Margaret, the bigger that group gets, the more challenging it is to actually get work done. And this is really the worker group that will really put together what's going to happen. The other part of this, though, is we will go back to each school community and ask for additional representatives for those communities that will be also involved in the process. They won't necessarily be the day-to-day operation of running the forums and putting together the process, but they will be in each building representing that community in the bigger picture, so that they're the communication conduits. They're the people that are asking other people to come to the bigger forums, that they're the people that are going to their PTAs and their community and saying, hey, there's a big discussion coming up on a forum issue and we want turnout. And so those people will be involved, but just not at that worker kind of level. So, and Malia, you can comment on that too, but that's the way I understand the process.
That's correct. There will be building community facilitation teams, community engagement facilitation teams. But also the point I would like to make is we ask each of our principals, and we've asked you and we've asked various people in the community to give us names. And we have a list right now of over 100 names. And part of what we're going to try to do is call that down to a group of 15, 20 at the most, people who represent various factors. So you're trying to weave together a tapestry, just like with any good board. One person hopefully will not just represent one constituency. You know, so somebody might have a child at elementary and middle school, or middle and high school. They might represent the PTA. They might represent, you know, some other group. So we're looking for people that kind of have, we can, you know, have multiple hits on this person, and they have their hands, you know, their outreach, their network to multiple parts of the community. So that's the other thing. That's how you get there with a smaller group, is by choosing those people that have multiple touch points.
Margaret, go ahead.
Sorry. So thank you for that clarification, because that helps me to understand this a little bit better. So this 15-member team is kind of like the operations, the working group. Then it will expand to a larger group. And that is what I'm most excited about. And I'm wondering, is there any detail yet on how many what that larger group might be and how they might be involved?
I believe Unicom told us that each building would be asked to provide 5 to 10 individuals that would be their representative to the process. And then and beyond that, I think those are kind of the sounding boards for the facilitation committee as they roll out plans, to talk to them about what's coming up, get the word out, so it's kind of cross communication about what that process is the way I envision it.
Those people kind of become cheerleaders, so that when we're doing the community presentations, they're helping to get out you know, a lot of different segments of the community, and they talk it up in their buildings. And I actually met with my counterpart in Wheaton today. They just finished community engagement with the same company recently, and she said she would actually use her building teams to make calls and make that personal outreach to people. That, you know, I can send an email to 10,000 people. It's not a real personal invitation. So those teams are very helpful in making the personal ask and getting a lot of people to come out and get involved in the process.
I apologize. One last comment. And if I could also say, it's great, I like the building teams. Can we also remember to include those community members who do not have children in the school? Because that is actually our larger base. So let's be sure to have a significant group of people who do not have children in the school, but who are actually obviously very involved in our community and can reach out to a different base of people that the people in the school might not have access to.
And we can do that through focus group interviews too. That was one of the things that Unicom could do, and they've done that very successfully. More like town hall meetings. So that's part of the plan from them.
We'll have to see exactly what it looks like, but, you know, we could set up a focus group meeting at the Abbey or wherever seniors gather, and, you know, that could be a possibility that we could do that. And I would hope we would have some of those community people that you're talking about on the community engagement facilitation team, and maybe even, I know Unicom has recommended to us that sometimes it's nice to have one of your co-chairs be somebody from the community, certainly somebody that people know, but maybe not somebody who's been all that actively involved in the school. So I think they did that at one of the recent districts they worked in, where the person was well known, but really when he came on as the co-chair of the community engagement facilitation team, had never really had a personal conversation with the superintendent. So that kind of gave him some authenticity, you know, believability among the rest of the community. So, you know, we'll be looking at that possibility too.
John?
I remember when this was described for us in the summer, in June. And this just looked like a great way to go about it. And it's funny how perspective changed when I picked it up cold and didn't realize what it was. My first reaction was, geez, isn't this stuff the board's supposed to be doing? You know, engaging the community and coming up with strategic plan. But it really is a focus. And I, just so that it doesn't appear to be a delegation and then they go off and they do it on their own, can you kind of talk about how this might work in an ongoing, like what sort of reports would be delivered periodically so that the board could find out what they're up to and what are they doing and so forth? I understand there's a certain value in having another group preparing something and bringing it back to the board. Is it going to just come back as a package, or is the board going to be updated as it goes along? I mean, how's that going to go?
I would think there would be some periodic updates, but the main thing is that we want 1 or 2 board members to serve on the community engagement facilitation team. So Shannon has agreed to do that. Jim's going to try to help out with that when and where he can, and I think Margaret is also going to step in where and how she, how she can. So I think you're going to have people from the board involved. We can obviously only have 2 board members at a meeting, but I think we can, make this work so that you're getting information from your fellow board meetings, whether that comes to a committee meeting, I'm not sure. But the way this is structured is there really is one final big report that comes to the board. But of course, you are always welcome to come to any of the community engagement town hall meetings, and we would encourage you to do so. I don't think it will be a process totally apart from your experience. And I think the beauty of this too is it's not a top-down thing, it's a bottom-up thing. So, it's a process of discovery. And so the community, together with the board, is discovering the educational priorities for the Elmhurst community, for the District 205 community.
I think it was described in the summer is helping the community decide what it wants to do. And I thought that was really good. It's an idea that, maybe can somehow be added in this in some way, so that it doesn't, it looks a bit like a delegation. It's just my thought.
I had the same kind of question around engagement. I guess we've done a lot of work here as a board, and Dave and the staff and the administration have done a lot of work around kind of lighthouse district kind of things. I mean, you guys have come up with ideas and whatnot, and I think it's not just bottom up, but it has to, in some respects, be a sharing of ideas between the experts in education and the public. You don't want another board full of green dots and no red dots. When we talk about this process, it's not, first off, it's not, this thing is not being engaged in order to engineer an outcome. I think everybody needs to understand that too. I mean, there's not something preordained that we have that we're trying to figure out. We legitimately have started to identify some issues and opportunities and options for our district. There is a process around gathering what the community wants and what they relatively value around academics, activities, and things like that. But there are ways to generate the funds to fund other things. There's trade-offs, and that's probably where we need the help. But those decisions have to be jointly discussed between the experts and then the folks that are our community. And there is an educate and inform role on behalf of the administration, the staff, and the board for the public. And what I'm trying to understand is, go away, form these groups, come back with a report, and kind of how that process leads to that, because the report and what it is, because I would expect that I would love to see a report that talks about, kind of really defines and coalesces around the priorities of the community. And then we talk about, we've talked about things like grade level centers. We've talked about things like pre-K, 3-tier busing, boundary changes, all kinds of different options to free up funds, to invest funds, and to evolve education in Elmhurst. And those are all things that we've spent a lot of time, and you guys particularly as an administration, have spent a lot of time understanding. And so at some point, the marriage of our goals and the options then come down, and I think as a dialogue the board desires, where we get to have these conversations with the community, where it's not necessarily, I mean, ultimately the report is more of what you've got a scribe or a note taker, somebody that's a facilitator. But at the end of the day, that report contains the elements of the discussion that we had with the community, that the administration had with the community, that we collectively as a group of experts and stakeholders came up with. And so I just want to make sure that it doesn't feel like, and I think this might be what you were getting at a little bit, John, in that, you know, it's our job ultimately to come up with a plan. And the board has to approve it. Now, I believe it's the community's plan, and we represent the community, but at the end of the day, we're supposed to educate, inform, and facilitate that. And so what we've done is ask someone to help on the facilitation side, but the ideas and the conversation needs to be two ways and collaborative between the experts, the folks that represent the community, and then the different stakeholders. And so I just wanted to, and maybe I'm babbling on about what it is, but just making sure that it doesn't start to feel like some of these old processes. This isn't EPIRT, you know, this isn't, you know, but if you look at it at the top, it's we're going to engage the community, they're going to have a bunch of focus groups, and we're going to have a report that's issued. And it's not that. And we absolutely want to have an engagement.
This is all about engagement.
Right.
I mean, that is not the preconceived notion I had in this process.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the report is going to give you what the community, their voice in a report. That's hopefully what you're going to get is, here is what the community is saying about a number of issues that have been laid out there for the community to discuss and to have a dialogue about, including with the Board of Education.
Right.
But I think what you're going to get back is, hopefully, is a more dialogue about what is the depth of discussion on each one of these issues. What are the pros and cons that the community is thinking about, and what are they hoping or looking at the board to do in the future, and what does education look like in the future? So I don't see this as an EPIRT process. I don't see this as a top-down process. I think our role is to simply roll out, here are some key issues that the community may want to talk about and discuss. What are those issues? Do those resonate with the community? Are those the ones that the community wants to talk about? And then capture that conversation would be the way I would envision.
And so then I think, I mean, it's not necessarily a report, it's just a documentation of the dialogue and the conversations that have gone on. So I just want to make sure everybody that's looking at the tape or whatnot understands that I don't think this is, we're going to sit back and wait for the report to come, and we're going to read it, and we're going to be very anxious about what it might say. I mean, we're going to know what's in it because we're going to have participated in that process, as all of us will have. It's just a document that it documents that so that everybody understands the conversation we had, so that when we go back to it, we can all say, hey, yes, remember we did have this discussion, we did agree to it.
And this document guides that.
Right.
That's why this is so critical, because it guides that whole process. And the report itself is not the end, it's the beginning.
Right. Right. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that as we go down this road, because somebody that just pulls this and reads it says, oh my gosh, it's another EPIRT process, these guys are trying to do something. And it's not that. I mean, we went through the Unicom coming in and talking to, it's a very different process, and I think we want to make sure that people understand that.
Karen?
Thank you very much. I thought this was really good. I'm glad that we're doing the, I'm going to call it a coordinated community engagement effort. And really, you know, Dave, to your point is, even as it follows up the Vision 2020 is, what is that 21st century education? What is that 21st century classroom, if you will, support around that classroom, and that 21st century student learner? And so that's really the focus. So we might have ideas that start the generation of dialogue with the community, but the community will be telling us, probably repeating things that they've said to us, right? But having that rich dialogue about what are those things. Talking about long-term as well as stepping stones to get there. So it's looking at, like you've laid it out, where there's a vision and a mission. How do we accomplish that through what the community values, what, you know, cost benefit is, and then how we would strategically roll that out through the system, through the classroom to the student, and ultimately achieve what we've been known for here in Elmhurst, is a great education system. And so this is a good coordinated effort to do that very well and to continue the dialogue and document the dialogues.
No.
Each of these sessions, there is, as you said, Chris, an educate and inform role. So there will be a presentation at each of these, and then the general format is that it goes into sort of a World Cafe sort of setting where the participants are really sitting down and dialoguing and working together. And in most districts, if it's at all possible, they actually videotape these sessions and put them up on the website. So it's a very transparent process, you know. There should be some kind of notes that are shared also out of it, just sort of like the learnings from the evening. But it will be an open process.
So the one question that I have is, just so that we're clear about how this parlays with the Superintendent Advisory Committee, that linkage, if any.
Well, I think the Superintendent Advisory Committee was an attempt to bring some key stakeholders in from across the community and start talking about some key issues that were relevant then and are probably going to be repeated again. And it was great feedback to have the Superintendent Advisory Committee, at least for me as the new superintendent at that time, to get a sense of what those issues were and how much in the process the education part of where the district was, what were some of the issues that the community was reflecting. And then, and as Chris said, not many people, when Chris said the green dots, he was referring to that Superintendent Advisory Committee. Not everybody got that. But that's what Chris was referring to. And if you remember, it got to everybody doing green, everybody liked everything. And I think the important thing here is to have a dialogue a little more deeper than that now, to know that is something we have to address, that you can't green light everything. There are some consequences and other choices you have to make if you green light everything. And I think that's part of the dialogue you have with the community to say, yes, you want full day kindergarten. Here are the counterbalances to that you're going to have to wrestle with as a community, and where do you come down on that? So that's Chris did refer to that.
Now,
I feel a little scared that I know where Chris is coming from.
that would worry most people. I have one question. Does anyone have any rewording or any suggestions? Otherwise, we're running with the document as written. I personally like the document as written, but we're all okay with it? Shannon, go ahead.
My one comment was, I'm not sure if it's in, well, I guess it is. I see it one place, down towards the bottom, long-term future. Well, I don't know. I don't know how many times we're talking about long range, but I wanted to get a sense from the board. We're talking, and Malia, we're talking about 10 years, something that's 10 years out, 5, I want to agree on that. We're talking about approximately 10 years for the long-term vision and strategy.
I don't want to get ahead of the game here because the facilitation team needs to be part of this decision, but we have tossed around you come up with a brand and a logo for this whole campaign. And I think, Jim, what did we talk about? We said Focus 205 for 2025, something to that effect. Now, they may decide something different, but I think once you brand it, once you put that out there, then you've got that focus, that vision, that long-term Focus 205 for 2025. Then you get the idea that this is not for next year or 5 years. This is really a long-term vision. So I think that will help too, once we come together and we talk about this as a community engagement facilitation team and we say, how do we want to roll this out to the community?
And I think it's difficult to look into the future any more than 10 years from now, frankly. I mean, you can't say, here's what we envision the school district to look like 25 years from now. None of us know that, right? 10 years, is roughly one cycle of kids. And I think that's a reasonable expectation to look into the future. Anything we do, anything that comes out of this, probably isn't fully implemented in a decade. I should say it. Probably everything that comes out of this, it would take, if the community chose to fully implement everything that came out of this, it would probably take a decade to do so. So I think a decade is the right length of time to plan for the future. Chris?
Can I suggest that you don't have to time box it? I mean, the meat of it probably is, but you're going to have things you can do now. And you're going to have things that you're going to do in the next 4 to 6 years. You're going to have 10 years, and you're going to have some foundational things that you're going to need to have in place to create an ongoing success on a trajectory that leads beyond that. And so they'll get less precise the farther you go out, but I do think that we need a vision for where we want to get to, and it may take longer than 10 years to get there. The execution side of this may be nearer term, but I don't know that we need to constrict it. We can have the tagline that we're kind of looking at it for there, but I don't think we just don't have to define it or box it right now.
No, I wasn't trying to do that. What I'm more discussing is like a shared purpose. We need a shared purpose for the future. So it's getting people to head in the same direction in our community. We're all going over here. We're moving in this direction over here. So it's more about a shared purpose. We have the same vision. We know where we're going. It's kind of, we've talked about this before. We have that T-shirt that everybody knows. If you talk about District 205, oh, that they're doing this. It's really, where are we heading? Where are we going? So it's thinking more long term.
And again, my point is, let's look over what can we do for this next generation of kids in our system. So pre-K through 12, so roughly a decade. What can we do over that decade? We're not looking into an era of flying cars, and that's way too long. Let's just take a look at this generation. We agreed. Leave the document stand as written. Okay. Anything else? Then let's move on. Next is board committee reports. The policy committee has met since our last meeting. John?
Let me get organized here. We had pretty extensive policy committee meeting. We had a couple of press updates to go through. We let it off with something that had both a local issue and a press update, and that was policy 6:130, credit for alternative courses and programs, course substitutions. And this tied in to, well, one of the issues by which it was viewed was the policy existing for the exemption from physical education for sports and potentially for other activities. We talked about it for quite a bit. And having those three things circling all at the same time, the press review and trying to understand what press was trying to do, having our own issue of trying to reach kids who are in a non-traditional role towards graduation, and then reaching out for the PE waiver issue at the same time became a big issue, and we decided to, a big challenge, rather. And we decided to put things aside and seek some legal help on the physical education waiver issue. The idea being there is a physical education waiver in the policy manual. There is some interest in exploring whether that might be expanded to include activities that are not within the under the organization of the district, and might be recognizing outside activities for PE waivers. And we thought we would ask our attorney, what are the options before we consider a policy change? I think we had a good understanding about the part of the policy that dealt with alternatives to getting credit towards high school graduation, but that will have to wait until the rest of the policy is revised, and we're going to take it up at the next policy committee. So a long way of saying we deferred it until later. If anyone wants to talk about that, we can talk about it now, or we can talk about it later, but that one's still going to be on the agenda next time. I'm going to list the policies that did get approved for first reading. Some of them in the form provided by press, many of them with slight revisions. I think there was a sense at the meeting that some of the press revisions were not quite as, didn't have the depth of analysis that we would have preferred, and we expected that many of them would be revised very soon. They were a bit overly specific. We tried to generalize them so we wouldn't have to constantly be picking them up. So I could just run through that. Policy 2140, board member communication, minor changes from the press recommendation. 445, insufficient fund checks and debt recovery, again, minor changes and recommended. 4110, transportation, minor changes recommended. Food services, we took the press version, we're recommending passage. Equal employment opportunity and minority recruitment, recommending the press version for approval. 5185, family and medical leave. 5220, substitute teachers. 5285, leaves of absence. 660, curriculum content. 6280, grading and promotion. 6300, graduation requirements. Those were all recommended in the press version. Credit for alternative courses, as I said, we went over that. This is the repeat of what we talked about initially, is it? Or am I confusing the two? One says 6310, one says 6130. I'm going to have to check on that. 6340 recommended as is. 750 school admissions and transfers recommended as is. Same with 770 attendance truancy. 7100 health, eye, and dental examinations, and 7270, a policy change to track some legal change, some law changes to the law. We tried to pick up some policy revisions that had been tabled at earlier meeting. Policy 5240 on suspension, we decided we needed more clarification from the attorney before we could pick that up, so that will also be deferred to the next meeting. I think I've summarized it. Is there anything someone remembers that I've left out? That's good enough.
Thank you, John. Go ahead.
For policy 6130, in the meeting minutes it states that there's a state law prohibiting the board from honoring parental excuses. But I was under the, I thought I heard, this is going back, maybe in the fall, that there are other districts that had some kind of waiver for this activity, outside district activity. So I believe it was happening in other districts, so I don't know. I don't know who those districts are or how they're doing it.
That's one of the things that we asked our staff and attorney to look at is how are they doing it? What is their theory, because that one state law seems a little bit specific, but these other districts are doing it based on another approach, substitute credit, I believe it's called. And we asked our attorney to look at that before we open up the discussion amongst ourselves as to what the policy should be. We should know what the options are. So.
also, if I may add, perhaps a great topic for the PTA Legislative Forum. Anything else for John? Emily, go ahead.
Just on that one point, and this was why we had to ask the attorney, because there was also discussion, but Shannon, there could be a difference between waiving it or substituting it, something that was a substitute as opposed to a waiver. So that's some of what the discussion centered around.
All right, shall we move on? Next is the superintendent's consent agenda. There's one thing on the agenda, and that is the approval of a superintendent search firm. So in order to enter discussion, why don't we have a motion?
I think we should remove that so we can have full discussion. Consent agenda is something that doesn't have discussion. So I'd ask that we remove the one item on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you. All right. All right, now help me with the Roberts Rules of Order here. Do we have to vote to remove it?
No, it gets removed, but since there's nothing else to approve, we do away with the approval of the consent agenda and just move to the next one.
Perfect. So, over the last 2 Thursdays, we have invited 6 firms to present to us and take questions from us. 4 accepted our offer. The Illinois Association of School Boards, School Exec Connect, BWP, and Hazard Young and Associates. So we've spent time with each firm. They presented us roughly for 20 minutes. We've asked them roughly 20 minutes of questions. And tonight the task upon us is to choose one of them to lead the search for our district for our next superintendent. So I've also asked the board to submit what they consider to be their most important criteria in that selection. I asked Ellen Walsh then to compile that list and remove any repetitions. So that is on the supporting documentation on this item on the agenda. So our criteria include pool development, in other words, the firm's ability to search and contact resources and activities, advertising networking and existing relationships, pre-screening activities, which includes forums, surveys, stakeholder interviews, and the review and screening of applicants. Second item is advising us and exercising professional judgment. Third item is their ability to manage, support, and execute the process. Fourth item is their relevant experience and references as self-reported. Item number 5 is the cost of their services. Item number 6 is the level of interaction with the community. In determining what the community, as well as all of our relevant stakeholders, are looking for in the qualifications for a new superintendent, as well as a pre and post resume screen to make sure what's represented is correct. 7 is the flexibility and ability to tailor their services based upon our needs and what we expect them to do. 8 is their experience in recruiting for similar districts as to our own. Number 9 is the emphasis on a proactive versus reactive approach, which is defined as recruiting versus advertising, to proactively seek the right candidates, and that goes back to the size of the network that each of these organizations has. And finally, the depth and reach of their network and relationships in and around Illinois and nationally as well. And one of the challenges that actually was alluded to during the 2020 presentation is state of Illinois has recently changed and heightened their bar for teacher and administrator certification within the state of Illinois. So making it more difficult to recruit administrators outside of Illinois that can quickly have their certifications recognized by the state of Illinois. So, anybody want to lead off? Not all at once. All right. So let me rephrase the question. Are there any of these four organizations that we can quickly identify after our interviews from each board member that rose to the top of your evaluation? Do you have a top one or two firms so we can attempt to quickly limit our discussion down to a narrower number of choices? Emily, go right ahead.
If I had to pick my top two, it was BWP and HYA.
Well, same thing.
Well, this will be easy. Same.
Wow, same thing.
Same two firms.
Me too, same.
I'll make that unanimous.
We agree on some things.
How about that? So, I mean, I would agree. I think those two firms stood out head and shoulders above the others. Frankly, I think all four are qualified. What stood out in my mind of those two firms is the breadth of their network, their ability, their willingness and capability to be proactive in recruiting candidates, and along with their desire to be flexible to meet our district's specific needs and the needs of our board, frankly. Frankly, I think we'd be well served by either of those two firms. How do we limit it from here? We need to choose one. We can't hire, well, we could hire both. That would just be awkward, so let's not. How do we limit it down to one firm? John?
You know, we came up with these criteria. We should probably apply them. And I think, what the heck? No, I think that would be helpful for us to kind of each describe. Professional services, though, is a different procurement process. It has a lot to do with, obtaining judgment. And I want to correct what I said before. It is, in a sense, objective judgment when you said objective, and I was really more focused on the detached professionalism, and I probably misspoke when I didn't think it was objective. It should be, to a certain extent, objective. But I think each of us should probably go through now that I've went ahead, got started.
Okay, let's take it one criteria at a time. Pool development. Search and contact resources and activities, advertising, networking, existing relationships, their ability to conduct pre-screening activities, forums, surveys, stakeholder interviews, etc., and the review and screening of applicants. Go ahead.
With respect to this particular criteria, HYA was stronger for me from several different standpoints. One, the firsthand candidates, people that would support us, are very familiar with a district like ours from every perspective. Secondly, they were very clear on defining the desired characteristics that they would be looking for that represent the key characteristics in a superintendent to lead a high-performing district. And so it's very clear as they go out to all of the constituents and stakeholders to identify priorities and what are the what's required to follow Dave in a superintendent role. I also thought that it was clear to me on the ability to take in many different diverse perspectives and to quickly synthesize it and be able to articulate why one solution is better than another, and to respond to the challenges that we have in education. So those are three very strong elements for me for HYA.
Anyone else? Margaret?
Insofar as pool development, this was a criteria for me that set HYA and BWP apart from the other two. So I cannot rank one or the other higher on this, but I think they both had, I thought they both had very strong processes and practices and examples on how they have excelled in this area. So I could not, this was not a distinguishing factor for me. So they're even for me on this one.
Okay. Anyone else? John?
I feel the same way. In fact, I thought all four forums kind of displayed the same methods and things. They are, I think, all doing best practices in that field from what I could tell with my limited experience.
The process does seem to be almost identical between all four firms. I will agree. Anyone else have anything to add in this category? Pool development. I also ask our cabinet with us tonight, who also has experience with observing these firms. If they have anything to add, please don't be shy. So let's. It sounds like we're in a dead heat here. On Chris.
I make just one suggestion as I'm trying to figure this out as we're going down here. Maybe it's easier just there are dead heats in a lot of these. And maybe just focus on the areas where one may excel over the other, because there's probably 2 or 3 items on my list for each one that may be different. As far as the rest of it, it's all kind of 6, 1 half dozen the other.
Then let's move through them more quickly. And on number 2, does anyone have any aspect where one of those 2 firms stands out above the other? Okay. Number 3.
As far as advising client professional judgment, I was very impressed with HYA, with the statement that said, I'm going to tell you my professional advice based on experience, but I'm going to wind up doing what you ask me to do. And I thought that was really good. I respect a professional that says, you're on the wrong track. At the same time, realizing the final decision is ultimately the client's.
And I guess in that category, to put in a word for BWP, we've worked with Joe Porto in the past. I think he probably knows us better than than any of the consultants that entered here. I think he's earned the respect of our board. And, in that same aspect, I don't think he'll be shy about telling us if he feels we're on the wrong track. Additionally, I think he can represent us well to the candidates that we're interviewing. I mean, he can say to the candidates, look, I've worked with this board. I can attest to this board and what you're walking into. So, Emily.
That was my thought when I saw that if BWP selected that Dr. Porto would serve as the lead consultant with 2 assistants. I thought the same thing. He does know us pretty well. Yes, I mean the district, not just us.
Yeah, I mean he's gotten a unique perspective. To explain to everyone, he is the consultant in a different role that we hired to conduct the exit interviews for our departing administrators last year. So he got a firsthand deep look at what administrators thought, and then also an extensive feedback session with the board, and got to know us quite well during the process as well. So as far as the next item, management support and execution of the process, anything stand out? Anyone? Okay. Relevant experience and references? Anything stand out? Go ahead, Margaret.
I don't know where you put this, but this is where, and this might be a different term, but this is where I thought about the knowledge that BWP brings to the pool, the knowledge of our district, its positives and its challenges and opportunities, and that I thought set it apart. So I know we talked about that in advising, client, and personal judgment. I rated that higher in the relevant experience category, and that was BWP there.
Anyone else on that topic? Go ahead.
And I don't have my notes. I didn't get a chance to grab them on the way out the door. If I recall, did BWP do some selective North Shore district as far as high-performing districts that when you're looking at comping, kind of lighthouse district kind of stuff? I think they both had a good resume, but were there a couple of, was it deeper? Was BWD deeper in their, and I just would be interested in what your recollections are from the rest of you guys. Oh yeah, they were the ones that took Amy from us too. Okay, I'll have to put that.
Clearly, they can recognize talent. I'm just looking for their list of.
Yeah, I was looking at
searches
Winnetka and Hinsdale and Butler.
Yeah, it's on page
obviously
9
Butler.
for Winnetka School
Right.
District.
And they both have good lists. I just thought there were a couple of those there that when we kind of look at.
Yeah, Hinsdale, Arlington Heights, Park Ridge.
And granted, those aren't exactly like us, and they have their own unique set of challenges. But
Lincolnwood, Butler.
just from an experience standpoint, it just seemed like they had a deeper list. But not,
Yeah.
I mean, not head and shoulders deeper, but just there were some. That was our perception.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Should we? Cost?
Yeah. The only thing that I would mention here is that HYA essentially said that they would meet the lowest cost that was there. So that would be, one consideration.
Okay.
Recognizing that the variation is not great
That,
in
yes,
any of these.
even at the prices they propose, the variation is small.
Correct.
Yes. So. Yeah, I know. Actually, Chris, a couple more searches in my notes on BWP. Cedarburg, Wisconsin, which is the #1 student achievement district in the state of Wisconsin, and Winnetka as well. So interaction with the community, pre-resume screen, post-resume screen. Go ahead, John.
If we could just go back to experience.
Sure.
And I'm not seeing, I think there's more Illinois school districts in BWPs. Is there a unit district referenced in BWPs? I didn't see one. So this may be, a balancing out, because I think there's one unit district in Illinois unit district in HYA, and that was Woodstock. So.
And he was from.
Was from 203.
He was from 203.
It's from two. Okay. So.
Flexibility and ability to tailor services based upon our needs. Go ahead.
I thought HYA had the most flexibility when they talked about bringing us a pool of candidates, and then we could possibly look at their database. They seem very open to, just tailoring it to what we need for our district, and not having a one-size-fits-all service.
You know, I will agree, and that statement really really stood out to me. I thought, all right, great, I have to give them the nod on flexibility, but you know, the other thing that I ask is, you know, we discussed the pros and cons of open searches versus closed searches. How do you, I mean, and particularly the statement said, look, you know, if you want to look at our database, if you want to look at the resumes of candidates that have applied, how can you possibly characterize that as a closed search? And when candidates know that, would we miss some good candidates because they fear that it would not be a closed search? Anybody have a different perspective from that comment than I do?
I think we asked that question to them, and the answer was that the boards have a duty of confidentiality, and everybody understands that, and as long as it's just the board seeing it. That was his answer. Now, whether that's going to make candidates comfortable, I mean, I would ask administrators what their reaction to that would be, but that was his explanation. Do you guys feel like, from a confidentiality standpoint, that the board can keep its mouth shut, I guess? Feel free to be honest. I think just the way I think.
Or perhaps if that would provide you comfort, if you were looking at it, if that would provide you comfort, if you knew a board was seeing all of the applicants that applied, would you be comfortable with that?
I will tell you from personal experience, I have been involved with all 4 of the firms that you interviewed, and I will tell you that I have never had an issue with confidentiality, whether it was listed as an open search or listed as a closed search.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Can you just tell us?
Closed session.
Oh. So, experience of recruiting for similar demographics, I think we talked about that.
Actually, just on the other one, from flexibility and ability to tailor, every one of them had some good ideas. And that's one of the benefits of having these guys go through is that I would encourage us to pick and cherry pick some of the things we liked. I particularly liked the offer where I think it was BWP that offered one-to-one conversations with both the administration and the board to get our feedback, so that it's not groupthink and it's not dominated by somebody in that conversation. I thought it was a great idea. There were templates that other firms had kind of put together too. So as we put this together, I would encourage us to pull what we like the most. But from a flexibility standpoint, I think it's all there. But I like BWP's approach, particularly that one-on-one piece.
Anything else on that topic? Flexibility, tailor service, or experience in recruiting for similar demographics? Okay. Number 9, emphasis on proactive versus a reactive approach, recruiting versus advertising, finding the right candidates and not waiting for applicants. I think they both have very large networks of people. I think they both make it their business to know superintendents and high potential assistant superintendents. Hazard Young seems to have a larger network in more states than BWP does. And I don't know, did anybody have a strong feel for your opinion of their strength of the network within Illinois? Go ahead.
I thought just the fact that I think BWP had 3 folks with us, I think, that were all ex-soups that had a network. The thing that struck me, though, is HYA was the one that cited a statistic that was surprising to me. 60 to 80% of their searches were the result of where they proactively approached the candidate and recruited them versus having them reply to solicitation. I don't know that we got a number out of BWP. I think that it was a big number, but I don't know if it was north of half. But that may mean that they went and actually asked someone to apply and counted that as someone that applied. But I just don't know if it's apples to apples. But the number struck me and it stuck out as the one that HYA presented, which was something in the north of 60% range, which I thought was impressive.
Okay. And I guess number 10, we were talking about as well, the depth and reach of their network relationships in and around Illinois. You have something, Margaret? Oh, there we are. Okay. So 11 and 12. The experience and background of the principals doing our search, similarity to and knowledge of our district and its aspirations. On HYA's benefit, the lead on our search is the former superintendent at Naperville. I think he understands unit districts quite well. On BWP's advantage, Joe Porto knows us. And, and a background on our district, better than anybody at any search firm, probably. Anything else on that? I mean, that's my 2 cents. Community engagement skills. Anybody draw a differentiation between the two? Okay, so after that, Emily, please.
I remember reading one of them offered a mentorship for a year after the selection. Does anybody remember? I can't find it in my notes now. Does anyone remember which one that was?
Yes. No, actually,
HYA.
that was School Exec Connect.
Oh, it was? Oh. I've heard 3 different answers now, so.
I thought it was BWP.
They all do, you're saying?
One of them charged for it. But...
Anyway, I didn't know if that was going to distinguish between these two. I can't remember. I remember thinking it was only one of them. I mean, did anyone else value that or think that was... Maybe the administrators can weigh in. I don't know if that's really valuable or if that's just something board members like to hear. Oh yeah, mentoring, it was BWP.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I stand corrected. Has that gotten us any closer? I think we're in great hands with either one. Do you want to go? You just want to go around state, if you have to pick one, which one it would be, and see if we have a clear majority. Do you want to lead off, Emily, again?
My pick would be BWP.
I think they're both very close, but if I were forced to choose one, I would choose BWP.
I think it's a tie, but if I had to, I feel confident with both firms, but I would probably pick HYA.
I'm going to be honest here. I mean, they both are very strong candidates. We made excellent points. We asked really good questions of everyone. I would choose HYA, but if we go through on this criteria, and I'm documenting kind of what we all talked about as a board, and we're kind of saying BWP is the majority of the comments, so do what you will.
Was that your vote?
She voted twice.
She did. She did. We're in DuPage County.
I made a vote, but I also assessed what we talked about.
Shannon, go right ahead.
I agree, but we'd be in good hands with both. I guess, we know Joe Porto, and he would be working with us And I've liked everything that he's presented to us in the past, so just having that relationship helps my decision. It's a known quantity, so I guess I go with BWP, although, very similar.
We're looking at me now? I don't get to say, I don't get to be last? But, I'm happy to go. Again, I think that, as I have said now, this is the third or fourth time, I think we'd be in great hands with either one. My nod goes to BWP.
And I think in what Shannon mentioned is kind of where I was leaning, which is it's Joe. I mean, the tie's broken by the knowledge of Joe and his help, and just we spent hours with him the one night, and so he's somebody you know. And if you had to do something that pushed it over the tie, it would be here's somebody that we've known, we've worked with, we like. Other than that, they both are fantastic firms.
All right. We're done? Right, Karen?
No, we voted, Joe.
Wait,
Okay, yeah, it looks,
Let's do this right.
we agree, BWP gets the nod
a minute.
on a,
Hang on.
all right, we're hanging for you,
Hang
John.
on. Hold tight. Let's do this right.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you for,
I move that the Board of Education approve the selection of BWP as the executive search firm to conduct the school superintendent search, and pursuant to the terms and conditions in their proposal.
moved by John. I need a second. Seconded by Emily. And we're spending money to hire these people, so Mrs. Walsh, please.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mrs. Vestito?
Yeah.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes. That's 7 ayes, no nays. Thank you very much. That it's a tough choice. It's a very, very hard choice. I think they're both excellent firms, but I think the nod came down to, who do we know? Who do we have experience with? And frankly, for me, who do I trust to step up and say, you guys are on the wrong track, you guys are looking at the wrong thing, that feels comfortable with us to do that. So, go ahead.
And it's a great position to be in, to have four great candidates, to be honest with you, that gave us a lot of, like Chris said, various different perspectives. So it's a good place to be at, to have, the best
Yeah.
choice of
I,
four good ones.
I hope we have the same difficult choice to make in the next step of this. So, with that, let's move on. Action on closed session items. We are going to table this, but I'm going to explain what the closed session item is and why. Actually, it's not so closed. It's been on the agenda. This goes back to Superintendent Pernod's compensation. This is something, while we've been talking to Mr. Pernod in the last several months about how long he'll stay with us, he wants to stay with us, that we just deferred, and now it's time to take care of it. Now, so what we're talking about is for all of our administrators, we have been covering their long-term health insurance premium, which for the last 2 years amounts to about 1% of their salary in pretty close numbers. We've been paying that for our other administrators. It has slipped our attention. We did not do that for Mr. Pernod. We just want to reimburse him for the last year and a half of not treating him the same as the rest of our administration, and then granting him a 2% raise for this year. So the reason we're tabling this is a combination of we can do this, we don't have to amend the contract, we can do this within our existing contract with Mr. Pernod, but There is a word in here about proration, and our intent is to make these retroactive, not prorated for the end of the year. So we want our law firm to make that very clear in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to get new wording from our law firm, and we'll take this up in our next meeting on the 24th of February. So we'll just delay this by 2 weeks so we can do this right. Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, then we'll move to board communications. I have a couple of things, but anybody else have things? Oh, can I also, let me also go back to the last item. We've gotten some questions from the community about our arrangements with Mr. Pernod and qualifying for pensions. I just want to make it clear that the pension law in Illinois will grant Mr. Pernod no pension from the state of Illinois. And we've had some questions on that. I just want to publicly state that Mr. Pernod does not qualify by retiring at the end of this year for a pension from the state of Illinois. No. So in my communications, first of all, congratulations to Emily Bastido. She has taken a new job, and I'll explain my rationale for pointing this out. So Emily is the new, I want to get your title right, Assistant General Counselor to Governor Rauner. And we had some questions about whether that would preclude Emily from serving on the school board. So I now have a written opinion, which I will circulate after this meeting, from our law firm that that Emily does not have a conflict of interest or incompatibility of office which would prevent her or limit her continued service as a board member. Our law firm's opinion is that she can legally serve in both capacities as long as she recuses herself from participation in discussion and voting on as a board member on any matter arising in her employment which has a reasonably direct impact on the interests of the school districts, on the school district, or on any school district matter which has a reasonably direct impact on her employment. Frankly, this applies to all of us. So recusal is accomplished by publicly summarizing at the outset of any discussion by the board of a conflicted issue, the reasons for the conflict, and confirming that she will not be participating in any discussion of or voting on the issue. And I point that out because, frankly, that applies to every single one of us. So, I just want to say congratulations, and congratulations on your continued service to the board. I was hoping that that would be the conclusion of our law firm's research. So, yeah, I guess that. The other item, the PTA Legislative Forum. I know we had talked about having dinner with the legislators beforehand. The PTA Council's desire is to have the questions that we would have for those legislators in a more public forum than dinner with these legislators beforehand. So I asked, again, our law firm if there was conflict with the Open Meetings Act. And I'll read you, I got his response just before the meeting began. It's their opinion that in this type, and then the forum is a large gathering at Bryan. So it says, in their opinion, that this type of forum is permissible under the Open Meetings Act, so long as board members in the audience direct their questions and comments solely to the legislators and not engage in any discussion with any other board members present including the 2 board members on the panel. Also, the 2 board members on the panel should not respond directly or indirectly through another panelist to questions or comments from a board member in the audience. The district's position will be enhanced if the board members in the audience do not sit next to or close to each other and do not respond to questions that might be directed to them by members of the public in attendance at the forum. It might also be helpful if at the outset of the meeting, the moderator or one of the board members on the panel explains the ground rules for participation by the board members so the public understands that the district is mindful of the restrictions on the act. I will forward this to all the board members because in the next paragraph, he says, please be aware of a complaint that was filed a year ago with the Illinois Attorney General against one of our school district clients by a citizen regarding 2 mission and vision public forums conducted by the district's administrator at one or more of that, at which one or, I'll get this right, at which more than 2 board members were present and 1 board member made a few comments. The Attorney General has not yet issued a response to the complaint, but we believe the complaint will be rejected. In the unlikely event a response from the Attorney General comes before the PTA's legislative forum, I will let you know whether it changes our opinion. However, even if the response is unfavorable, the consequences will likely be minor. So I'll forward this entire letter from the law firm to all of us so we all know the constraints placed upon us by the Open Meetings Act in that forum. So, and it sounds like we can achieve what the PTA Council wants to achieve, which is all of our participation, as well as complying with the Open Meetings Act. John.
I appreciate that we obtained the opinion, and I respect the opinion of the attorney. I think for my own part, my intention is, as an audience member, not to participate, to listen. We have 2 board members that represent the board up there, and I think that's fine for me, but everybody's got to make their own decision. That's my personal.
In order to be, if you have specific questions for the legislators about the challenges that we face that can be addressed in the legislature, I would recommend that you submit your questions to Karen or Chris, who are our 2 board member panelists, and they'll be able to read them and get answers from the legislators. Karen, go ahead.
So to that, actually, the PTA forum or PTA council is going to read a question from the board, and then they can read all of our questions. So if you want to coordinate with me, since I'm working with the PTA council, and send those to me, I can supply the PTA council with our questions.
Thank you. That would be great. All right. Anything else in board communications? John?
Saturday night's Silver Ball, celebrating 25 years of the foundation, was an absolutely remarkable event, and this board was well represented. The folks at the foundation do an excellent job. They work really hard, and this time they outdid themselves, particularly with respect to the last-second venue change that they had to undertake to move the entire event to a different facility because of some things outside of their control. A permit was not issued to occupy the established site, but they pulled it off, and it was a great event, and we're really grateful for the things that they do to make education better in Elmhurst. And I just want to say thanks to the foundation folks for a great event.
And if I can again repeat on behalf of the board, we'd like to congratulate the District 205 Foundation on their past 25 years of service to our schools and truly making a difference to our students, and wish them well in their next 25. They have really, really upgraded this fundraising event. I believe they don't have a final count yet, but they raised a lot of money. And it will truly have an impact on the children of our district. And we really, really appreciate all of the volunteer hours that they put in to make their organization successful, and on behalf of the board, we truly appreciate it. So thank you to the District 205 Foundation. Karen?
Can I just summarize with the PTA Council Legislative Forum
Oh,
at
please.
Bryan Middle School, Monday, February 23rd, 7 to 9 p.m. with our senators and state representatives. And the community is welcome. We'd love for them to be there.
In fact, we encourage the community to be there. I think it'll be a tremendous firsthand education in how the legislature in Illinois and school districts interact, the connections between the two, and frankly, who sets what rules. Anything else under board communications? Upcoming meetings, Tuesday, February 24th, and there are no committee meetings between now and our next board meeting. Tuesday, February 24th, the regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting at 7:30 p.m. in this room. Wednesday, February 25th, Finance and Operations meets at 6:30 p.m. in this room. Wednesday, March 1st, the Learning and Teaching Committee meets at 7 p.m. in this room. And our regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting after that is on Tuesday, March 10th at 7:30 p.m. in this same room. We're at that point where there is nothing left on the agenda, so I declare this meeting adjourned.